The search for Nancy Guthrie, mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie, is extended into its third week, and many questions about her disappearance remain unanswered. Authorities are still analyzing evidence in the case, and the Guthrie family continues to make pleas to her kidnappers for her safe return. To discuss the latest in the Nancy Guthrie abduction case, what we can learn from watching situations like this unfold, and how profilers aid in the search for missing persons and other criminal activity, we welcome back to the program Mary Ellen O'Toole, a former FBI senior profiler and professor of forensic science at George Mason University. Dr. O'Toole was also the lead researcher and author of the FBI's seminal work in school violence, The School Shooter, A Threat Assessment Perspective. Mary Ellen, welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Toole, when someone vanishes under suspicious circumstances, what immediately tells investigators this may not be a voluntary disappearance when we're looking and trying to understand abduction and missing person cases?
So there are three things investigators will look at. They'll look at the physical health of the person to see if there may have been some mental health issues that resulted in them wandering off. Number two, they will be looking at whether or not there's any evidence of a crime scene inside the residence or wherever it was they were taken from. And then the third thing that we do and spend an awful lot of time on is we develop a victimology of the individual, which means it's a complete research look at the victim to understand who they are and why or why not they should become the victim of a violent crime like kidnapping.
You know, the question that keeps popping into my head is about the coverage we're seeing of this particular case. And I heard a couple pundits, analysts talking about it. And what they were saying, one was saying they should be saying what they have because you want to let the possible abductors know that, oh my God, we're on to something so that possibly they could make a mix-up or a screw-up and do something in a panic which would help reveal them. The other side was saying we shouldn't be saying what we have because we're giving away the leads in the direction we're going. What school of thought do you fall into in this, and what's the pros and cons of both of these?
I think when you give out too much information, you always have to keep in mind you are talking to the offender or the offenders. And so if you don't want them to have specific information, then you don't put it out there. And if there is the risk of evidence being destroyed or somebody being hurt or the offenders even leaving the area, then you use great caution in putting it out there if it's going to negatively impact the case. The flip side of that is if you are really in need of the public's help on a case, like for example, yesterday, Savannah made a very compelling plea to individuals, including the kidnapper, but individuals that might know something about the case. And that can be extremely effective because somebody who is close to this person, and there likely are people close to him, they don't feel the same way that he feels. So we're talking two different personalities, the kidnapper and people close to the kidnapper. People close to the kidnapper can be compelled and feel that sense of empathy for the family and for Nancy and want to call into the police and say, this is very difficult for me, but I think I know who's responsible. So that kind of a response requires putting out information to the general public. So it's not one central philosophy. It really does depend on what's going on in the case and what the information and what the evidence is you're putting out there.
I guess my follow-up on that, though, is should we be dissecting that video or the videos that come out? And is that revealing too much to the possible assailants in this case, saying, oh, the way Savannah is talking, the way she's saying it, she's trying to work on this reaction and this and to get the... Are we showing too much, and is that stopping the process from working in why she's releasing the videos the way she is?
Well, there's always a downside, and you can't prevent that. So there will be people that will look at that compelling message that she had and feel that they disagreed with it or that it shouldn't be out there. But I can just tell you from my experience working kidnapping cases that having that type of compelling message can, in fact, influence someone to come forward. But again, whatever steps, whatever efforts law enforcement makes, we are going to be criticized, and we know that. And there always is a downside to releasing too much or not releasing enough.
When we're looking at cases like this, why are the first 24 to 48 hours so critical in these cases?
They're so critical because that's the time during which I think law enforcement has the best advantage. And it's also during the time, if something is going to happen to the victim, it frequently happens within that first 24 hours. And it's also during that 24 hours that law enforcement is able to probably collect the most compelling physical evidence at a scene. Not always. I mean, we can collect evidence days, weeks, months, even years afterwards. But in that first period of time, it's we have safety of the victim, and then we have to collect the evidence so we can get it into the laboratory and get it processed.
I haven't heard much about a reward. It seems like one today was offered up $100,000 by an attorney out of state. But, when Lady Gaga's dogs went missing, she offered $500,000. They found those dogs in a day. I mean, rewards work. How come they haven't offered $1 million reward on this? Or has the FBI said, don't do that yet?
I'm not sure why they haven't made that reward higher than what it is right now. And I agree with you that rewards can work. And maybe at some point they will increase that. But I think right now, at least in my experience with cases, the rewards over the years have not been that high, and that may have influenced people not to come forward. So there's one philosophy that we had, which may not be the best all the time, which is that most people do want to do the right thing, and most people actually do want to help. And so we have been, over the years, fairly fortunate having people with information call in and provide that information to law enforcement.
Dr. O'Toole, in general, I would like to know, how do investigators manage such intense public pressure without actually compromising a case like this? And then specifically looking at this case, the FBI is assisting local authorities. When do local authorities actually hand over a case to the FBI to take over? And how does that kind of interaction work?
Well, the first part of your question is, if I understood it correctly, is how do investigators deal with the pressure on the case that is being so closely scrutinized? And you have people that are on camera, investigators who are being filmed, who are actually out, for example, searching in the desert. And it can be fairly stressful, but I think most people that are involved in this case are incredibly committed to a successful outcome. The sense, the feeling in a command center when you're working a case like this is pretty powerful. And people come in to work after a few hours of sleep at night, if that, and they are really motivated to do a great job and to make a difference. And so that's what keeps people going on something like this, because they want a resolution and they want it to be a good resolution. I'm sorry, what was your other question?
And my next question was how the FBI, the interaction and collaboration between the FBI and local authorities, when is a case like this handed over to the FBI, or why hasn't it been handed over?
I can just tell you, in most cases, it's not really a matter of handing something over. It's a matter of working together in a partnership. When it becomes critical to use your phrase, hand the case over, is when the case has been resolved, ending up in arrest. Then it has to be determined, will it be prosecuted on the state level or on the federal level? So at this point, again, going back to the command center and how the leaders in both the Sheriff's Department and the FBI are working, is that if you were to walk into that command center right now, unless they were wearing a jacket, you really would not know who's the FBI agent and who's with the Sheriff's Department. We come in, we work together. That's our job. We do it every day. And we're not coming in saying, okay, the FBI is here, we'll take over from here. That doesn't happen. That does happen in movies. It used to happen years ago, but it really doesn't happen now. So there is a partnership, because we've learned the hard way. If you don't work and bring your resources together in a common goal, you're never going to solve a case. And that, again, over my 28 years as an FBI agent, I've seen that over and over again. And that's what's happening right here.
I guess what troubles me in this particular case, with so much of what troubles me about it, and of course, as we've stated, we don't necessarily in the public arena know everything that they know in the law enforcement end of it. But it seems as though since the actual abduction, there has been no credible signs of life. There has been no credible, in some ways, ransom notices. There's been a lot of questions about who's getting these ransom notes and what they say and what the deal is. How do you proceed in a situation where really it seems as though you don't know what players are legitimate, what's real here, if there is even something to still be found? I don't even want to say the way I'm going with that question, but I'll just let you take it from there.
I think I
Yeah.
I understand where you're going with that. The investigators have to continue, and they do. You don't have to tell them this. They will continue in an effort to resolve this case and to find Nancy alive and to bring her back. Do they understand that that may not be the end result? They do. They get that. They don't live in a world of unreality. But what they do have are hundreds of leads that are coming in. Those are prioritized, and those leads are being followed. You have another group of agents that's working on the forensic evidence. You have another group of agents and sheriff's detectives that are working on the technology. So everybody is working together to be able to resolve this case. And everybody is thinking, today may be the day. But we understand that the outcome may not be what we want it to be, but that doesn't stop the investigators from continuing on with the investigation. And I can promise you that there are leads being covered. There are interviews that are being done right now as we speak. More evidence is being collected that creates additional work and additional efforts on the part of investigators. So they're going to be busy for a long time.
So I know it's not the responsibility of law enforcement, but do they actually provide anyone like a psychiatrist or a therapist for the family going through this? Or does the family just have to come up with friends and the preacher? I mean, do they have any role in that?
I'm not sure what role that the FBI provides with that. We attempt to give the families as much support as we can. But if the family decided they wanted to reach out to a religious person, if they wanted to reach out for a minister or a priest or someone else, they certainly can do that. But we do try to provide as much support as we can. And part of that support is to answer as many questions as we can, to have somebody there with them, to make sure that we're able to respond to them and able to respond to their concerns. But I've had it where families have reached out for mental health support, and we certainly encourage that if that is something that they think would be helpful to them.
You know, Dr. O'Toole, from your experience, when families make public pleas, can that actually influence an offender's behavior? And what we're seeing is the Guthrie family is taking almost a strategy of really pleading in a, I don't know if the word is kind way, but saying, you know, we believe that there is still good out there. You know, we just want our mom back. Have you seen that type of strategy or plea work?
Well, yes, I have, but it's important that in making a plea like this, and I believe that they did know this because I think it was a very compelling plea, you are not appealing to the kidnapper. That is not going to move the kidnapper. When you look at the crime of kidnapping and you look at the behaviors that were involved from what we could see on the video and the amount of planning that went into this kidnapper, we call them the offender. This offender knew what they were doing and had some amount of planning ahead of time. Kidnapping is one of the most violent crimes that you can commit. And oftentimes, if not most of the time, when we see a kidnapping, it is a very cold-blooded crime that's committed by someone who lacks empathy for the victim. So the appeal yesterday would very likely not appeal to that person at all. However, that person doesn't live in a vacuum. That person probably has family, neighbors, relatives who suspect or who know specifically that he's likely involved in this kidnapping. That's who you're appealing to. They don't have the same personality traits as he does. So they will, at least some of them, one of them, all you need is one, will feel terrible about what's happening, and they will feel terrible about what Savannah's family is going through. And that's who you appeal to, so that they will be able to get the strength to step over those family bonds and attachments and contact law enforcement and say, I think somebody that I live with, somebody I'm related to, somebody that I'm friends with is responsible for this case. And yes, we've had that happen in other cases. So that's where the appeal is. It's not to the kidnapper themselves.
And that's where the $1 million reward comes in. Right?
Well, you're right about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask about evidence. And a lot has been made about the backpack. And this is where I can't even get my mind around it. You have a low-cost, mass-produced backpack that is sold, and as we understand it, in Walmart stores across the country. I don't know how that can lead you to someone because of the sheer volume, the length of time these have been available. How does the FBI dig into this and make that a piece of evidence that can actually lead to something?
Well, they may, at the end of the day, end up with nothing of value from it. And I would agree with you. However, we can't not do something about that. And I've seen in other cases where they can go to a store, a Walmart there in Tucson, and they can attempt to find out through all the cameras that Walmart is notorious for having, to see if they can go back in time and identify, for example, people that have purchased that. But more importantly, they'll go back and see, did someone purchase all of those things in one day? And they will send leads out to other field offices in the surrounding area and surrounding states to do the same thing. Now, it is grueling, time-consuming work. But if they're able to identify someone on camera, depending on when those items were purchased, that was standing in line and buying them, that could be a wealth of information. And the thing that, to me, if I were working the case, would be important is, how likely is that this person bought those items 6 months ago, 2 weeks ago, or a year ago? So they will go back in sections of time in order to attempt to identify someone that is buying that backpack, or better yet, all those things at the same time. If, on the other hand, this individual bought them online, then that presents a whole nother set of challenges.
Yeah. Well, and the gloves seem to be, at least they're looking for DNA in one of the gloves. Maybe they'll find something there. Maybe.
I didn't want to cut you off. You were going to answer Frank's comment.
No, the gloves are possibly going to be a very valuable piece of physical evidence, depending on what they find after they release the results of the DNA analysis. And again, they're not naive enough to think that that is going to be the single resolution to the case. We know they were found 2 miles away. We know that it's likely they were common gloves, so many people might have purchased them. And we know that gloves fall out of people's pockets all the time. But when you find a glove that looks similar 2 miles from the home, you don't really have a choice. You can look at it and say, yeah, that probably isn't the guy.
Well, gloves aren't a big staple in Tucson, Arizona. It doesn't get that cold.
Right, and gloves like that in particular. So it was imperative that they pick up those gloves and they process them, send them to the lab, and do the DNA analysis on it, just to be on the safe side. Yeah.
Just really quickly, when talking about this evidence, from your experience and your knowledge of the case, do offenders like this purchase items to do these crimes, or is it things they have? Would this person have more likely bought that backpack for this moment, or just taken a backpack they had to commit this?
He could do either, but in connection with all the other items, the jacket and the gloves and the face mask, it looks to me like he bought them specifically for this kidnapping.
Dr. Mary Ellen O'Toole is a former FBI senior profiler and professor of forensic science. Mary Ellen, thank you so much for joining us today on Hello Houston.
You're very welcome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.